Mason, comics today wouldn't be what they are or were or continue to be without Image Comics.
Terrific.
We thought it'd be a good opportunity. We recently did an episode of The Weekly Planet where we talk about Image Comics.
At length.
Ad
nauseum.
We thought we'd hit some of the key points here, but if you want to check that out, that's linked below. But I think it's a fascinating tale of
I agree.
go to woe and then go again.
Go again, exactly, yeah. Go to woe, slow.
Yeah.
Go again.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how did all this kick off? What happened?
Well, do you remember the 90s?
Vaguely.
You love the 90s, right?
No.
You love the nightlife?
I like to boogie, yeah, sure.
On the disco round.
Yeah, I do,
right.
yeah.
Well, look, in the 90s, comic books were big business.
They were.
Now, comic book movies are big business, but back then, the printed page was big business.
They were selling millions and millions of units, of single issues. Got some numbers here.
I'm ready.
The biggest comic book of all time was Jim Lee's
X-Men #1.
X-Men #1, 80 million. Still the biggest of all time.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah, insane.
I think I have an X-Men #2 somewhere, so I missed out somehow.
got-
But if I wanted an X-Men #1, I guess I could.
You got one of the 4 million copies that sold of that.
Yes, exactly. I could just go to a gutter and find a copy of X-Men #1.
You definitely
But at the
could.
time, like, comics were huge business, in no doubt in part because of the artists on these particular comics.
Yes.
Who had like this dynamic style. It was very exciting. It was kind of like a new direction for
Yeah, it was a
comic book
breakaway from what was done before. There were 7 in particular that kicked off Image Comics: Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, Will Horatio, Eric Larson, and Jim Lee. All names still in the industry.
That's
They're
true,
synonymous with some Image characters, but some other great stuff as well for other stuff. Well, they were working at Marvel, weren't they? And they revitalized all these big comic book characters,
That's
like your
true, yeah.
Spider-Mans, your X-Men's, your other things.
They were selling a lot of books, but the thing about working for one of the big 2 comic book companies was it was work for hire.
That's right.
If your comic book did sell 8 million copies, you weren't getting $8 million. You weren't getting $1 off every cover price. You did your work and then you went home for the day.
It was better than what it was in the 60s.
Yeah, right.
With like or even before that, with the deal that was, the Superman creators got initially, but it was definitely not what Image ended up being.
Exactly.
Still is,
and I think these particular guys were like, we're going to branch out on our own. We got plenty of ideas for incredibly enduring characters that have a lot of pouches on their uniforms.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna.
One of them might even get a movie one day.
It's true, yeah. And so they went to Marvel. There was like 3 or 4 of them, and then they were going to have a meeting 7 a.m. one morning to go to Marvel. We're going to quit, and then they just ran into a couple of others and went, "Hey, you also want to be in on this?
You want to quit?
You want to quit?" And they're like, "Actually, I do kind of want to quit now that you've sold me on this. Quitting's better than working."
Definitely. And the appeal of that was that not only do you get to create characters outside of, just because a lot of these people were working on established characters, obviously.
Yeah.
You create your own stuff, and then you keep the majority of the profits, and Image Comics itself keeps a small percentage of that.
Yeah, right.
But you are basically free to do whatever you want with those particular comic book characters. Yeah, so they quit Marvel, then they went into DC Comics and set up a meeting and then said, we're also not working here.
I know we didn't work here initially, but we're definitely not working here now.
That's exactly
Power move.
Yeah, and they put a really big dent initially in the industry and then contributed to a massive decline. So some of the sales numbers they were getting, like Spawn #1 did 2 million, Youngblood did 1.4. They were hitting 500,000 regularly for a bunch of other characters, Savage Dragon, Shadowhawks, a bunch of other stuff. Some of that is still around, and some of it is good. Savage Dragon is probably
still good, yeah.
Still good,
I've
yeah.
read a Spawn comic in a while, but that's doing all right.
He's got a lot of chains and capes, doesn't he?
That's what I like. Yep, chains and capes.
Yeah, so that makes such a dent though that the stocks dropped in Marvel, and they became the number 2 comic book company in the world.
Image Comics did,
which is absolutely incredible. People were lining up around the block to get copies of Youngblood. Like all these comic creators, really young at the time, like early to mid 20s, were treated like rock stars. We were talking about how Rob Liefeld was in a Levi's commercial.
That was the pinnacle of being a cool dude in the 90s, was putting on some 501 mom jeans and a tucked in white t-shirt and appearing in a Levi's ad, much like the creators of Doom did before them. Or after them, I don't know.
Around the time.
But
But the problem was, though the art was good for the time, you look back at some of it now and it's a lot of really twisted and broken waists and enormous muscles and tiny little feet and pouches and enormous
huge guns. Huge guns that look like just somebody's built a 5-foot-long harmonica and put a pipe on the end of it, you know? What even is it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
There was no reference to any kind of real and world anatomy or...
And that's a style, obviously.
Yeah,
that's a
for sure.
stylistic choice.
That's what people wanted, clearly.
That's what people wanted. I mean, that's why, you know, the new version of the Spider-Man, which was happening at Marvel, did so well because, you know, it was so fluid and dynamic, and that was taken over and then enhanced in a big way in Image Comics. The problem was, though, a lot of these guys weren't writers, and they're just very poorly written comics with some pretty good art for the time, I guess you could say.
Oh,
yeah.
let's not lavish too much praise on these guys.
No, but that's the thing, though. All of this needs to be commended because I think comics, on the whole, are better off because of this.
I agree, yeah.
But around this time, though, a few years after we had the comic book crash, because people were investing all this money into number ones, because they're thinking, well, the Superman number one sold for $200,000, so Spawn number one must be worth that. That doesn't work for a reason. We've talked about it in other videos and also on the podcast. But basically, the whole thing crashed. It all fell down. It also was because DC were doing big events like the death of Superman. You get a huge spike in sales and then a decline.
At one point, it was called the stunt treadmill.
Yes.
You get on that treadmill, you just have to keep running.
Yeah.
You know,
now they do it by just rebooting universes every 4 years and
Yes.
restarting it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. With your new 52s and whatever they're doing at the moment. So comic book stores were closing left and right. Something like 9 out of 10 closed in the US, which is a crazy amount. And also things over...
And that one remaining comic book store got real busy.
They
you know?
got pretty
People
they
from
got
all
pretty
across
busy.
America
Yeah.
going to that one remaining comic store.
The problem with also these 7 guys is there was egos at play there.
Yeah, right.
They mostly get along now, but also they were missing deadlines. They didn't know anything about printing or distribution or accounting or whatever, so that also played into a huge decline of the business. They had some help, some outside help. They brought some people in, but basically cracks were showing, creators were leaving. Jim Lee sold off his subsidiary of Image to DC Comics.
Yeah.
Rob Liefeld also went back to Marvel and was sort of fired, but sort of left. A bunch of other stuff happened. It wasn't looking good.
But then it was looking
But then it
good.
was looking good because around the late 90s, they decided to turn it around and take a focus away from superheroes.
That's a fun reversal of like a normal, like a rock biography. It's always like they were flying high, but then it all came crashing down.
That's it.
But
Imagine
now-
if it was like Freddie Mercury died, but then he had a twin brother, and Queen continued to this day. Yeah, but basically it got turned around in the sense of they just encouraged good stuff.
Yes.
It didn't have to be superhero related. It could be anything as long as it was good. And then from there, we got like The Walking Dead.
Saga.
Like,
Invincible.
Invincible, Kick-Ass, Sex Criminals. All of these ones that are really different than what had really been seen before as far as mainstream comics go, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe that's not how they intended it to be initially.
I don't think so.
But-
It was
but
mostly
that-
pouches and weird wastes.
but that's the ultimate expression of what they wanted, which is creators creating what they felt was going to work and then reaping the rewards of that has actually ultimately happened.
That's exactly it. And so off the back of that, the basic core principles and rules, I guess, of Image Comics remains the same, where if you create something, it is yours, Image takes a cut. But that's why we're also getting all these creators have made money and made names for themselves through this, either for characters they've created there or also because they've gone on to write for various different companies. But that's also why we got a Walking Dead TV series. You know, a bunch of other stuff is being developed. We've had movies, you know, a bunch of Mark Millar stuff like Kick-Ass and Kingsman has been made into films. There's TV series out the bloody wazoo.
Out the wazoo.
Either out now or on the way. Spawn's getting a reboot. How's
Yes.
that gonna go?
Who knows?
I think Todd McFarlane's directing it. Who bloody knows?
Has
But
he directed anything else? Well, that's a video for another day.
I think he did a Korn music video.
He did. Got
Yeah.
the life, probably. The one with the bullets.
That sounds about right. But I'm interested to see where all that goes. But I just think this is the kind of stuff now that I gravitate towards in a lot of comic books.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, sure, I like, you know, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, whatever. But, you know, there's a lot of that stuff you talked about this, how a lot of that returns to the status quo or whatever every now and then.
Absolutely, because Superman's always got to be Superman.
He's always got to be Superman, exactly.
You can't, you know, all those characters have to remain kind of young and vital, and you can't, you know, radically change their status or whether they're alive or not.
That's right,
I mean, you can do it a couple of times,
You
but
do it a
then it
couple of
gets
times.
boring. But Image Comics allows people to go, okay, here's a new raft of characters. We don't know who's going to live, who's going to die.
Yes.
We don't know how their world's going to turn out.
And it's
that's
also,
exciting.
a lot of it has an end point.
Yes, for
Invincible
sure.
finished. It ran for 12 years. Might have been.
Yeah.
It's probably less than that.
Uh-huh.
But, The Walking Dead's still going, but that has an end point. You know
Yeah,
what I
right,
mean?
exactly. Yeah.
And hopefully the show does also. But the comic is great. Got him.
Got him.
But no, all in all, Mason, I give the Image universe a big thumbs up.
That's a medium-sized thumbs up.
My thumbs aren't that big,
Can you
alright?
give it a bit more extension? That's good stuff.
That's as high as it goes. I'd love to know, though, if people have any favorite Image comics or have any thoughts about the impact of Image comics in general. Also, is there anything from Image comics in the 90s which is good?
Good. That would be, yeah. I think Savage Dragons was solid all the way through, but maybe I'm wrong.
I just look at the last 10, 15 years of
Yeah.
what they're doing, and that to me that's the stuff that really defines
Here's a question.
what's good about Image.
Anyone out there really hate Image Comics? Who out there's like, Image Comics 2018, not for me.
I can see how you could hate particular runs of things, but I think there's something there for everybody, mate.
There's got to be someone, though. I want to hear from them.
All right.
Yeah.
Is it you? Not you. I'm talking to the audience.
The
Is
listener.
it you?
Yeah, right.
Anyway, like we said, this is just a bloody brief hint at what's going on. There are other crazier stories that are associated with this. There's meetings with Tom Cruise about movies for Image Comics properties. There's infighting. One guy gets his face scratched clean off.
He becomes a supervillain himself.
That's right.
Yeah.
These are all stories that definitely happened, except for the face thing that you can find on the Weekly Planet podcast, which is linked below. It comes out every Monday. And also there's videos here every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And we guarantee you that, unless sometimes they're late, which sometimes they are.
But I mean, that's completely out of our hands, isn't it?
It is in a way.
I blame the intertubes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
But thanks for watching.
Grab that gem, you guys. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.